everyone. I didn't introduce myself earlier. I wanted to make sure the land acknowledgement was the priority. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brenda Agnew, and I am a client liaison with Gluckstein Lawyers. That's my handsome son there. To my right, we're former clients of the firm, and I liked it so much that I made them hire me. So super happy to be here, and thank you everyone for coming here. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. So Charles was already up here, but I need to do the formalities. So for those of you who do not know, Charles is the owner and managing partner at Gluckstein Lawyers and has guided the firm to become one of the best personal injury firms in Canada. He succeeded his father, Bernard, who founded the practice in 1962. In 2001, Charles was recognized as a specialist in civil litigation. He frequently lectures at conferences for legal organizations, both locally as well as outside of Ontario, on all topics of personal injury, as well as the modernization of the profession using technology. He will be presenting on current and future trends in medical malpractice. Welcome, Charles.
Thanks so much, Brenda. I'm a little too short for the podium, so I'm going to stand over here. Hopefully they can still see me online. Welcome again, everybody. I don't think, can you all hear me or do I need a microphone? It's okay? Okay, so what I thought would be an interesting way to kick off the day, we've all talked about how complicated these cases are. I thought what I'd cover is sort of the statistics. I look at it from a business point of view, and I think about who we're dealing with as an entity that's going to deal with compensating our clients. And, you know, coming from a motor vehicle and a personal injury background, I compare sort of the business model for dealing with a personal injury practice versus dealing with a practice that focuses on medical malpractice. So I'm going to go through a few of the numbers for those who are considering the adjustment and why it is such a complicated route and a pretty onerous choice and why we have done that choice. Then I'm going to jump into a little more of a tech talk, which is exploring some of the innovations that we can see happening in the future. So it's really not future trends in medical malpractice, but future trends in medical technology, which I think would be interesting and how they're going to interplay with medical malpractice cases. And then finally, I'll turn to the finance piece of what it takes to run one of these cases. So hopefully I'll have enough time. There are a few videos there to break it up. Hopefully the sound will work. Hopefully it'll work online. And here we go. So the CMPA is made up of over 100,000 doctor members. There are some doctors that are not covered by CMPA. It's not technically an insurance company. It's a defense organization that is mostly funded through the Ministry of Health in the different provinces. So it's a reciprocal agreement where we pay taxes to our government. The government has an agreement with these medical associations, and they basically pay a lot of the insurance costs to run the CMPA. And I'm going to go through the structure of the CMPA a little bit. So the insurance that they pay, or the cost of being a member of the CMPA, the highest amount would be obstetrics. And in Ontario, that costs $50,000. And that may sound like a lot of money, but in the US, it starts at around $200,000. So it's quite different. And I think the reason for that is because we are subsidizing it. So the Ministry of Health is paying those Ontario doctors the excess amount to get them up to that $200,000 amount. And that's why the doctor co-pays a very small portion of that. That was an agreement they struck, I believe, in the mid-'80s when there was a big, extra billing effort where the doctors were fighting with the government about the costs of insurance. Now, the interesting part about the sort of statistics, Ontario Auto, just to give you an example, has about 40,000 victims a year from motor vehicle crashes. It's a $5 billion insurance market, meaning there is $5 billion paid out to deal with those 40,000 victims per year. Property damage, casualty, injuries, accident benefits, all of that comes out of the insurance. And so you imagine the payouts that come to the victims. Almost every victim gets something. Compare that to the CMPA. There are probably 70,000 medical errors in Canada per year. Out of those 70,000 medical errors, you can see on the statistics, only 600 last year started a claim. 600 lawsuits out of 70,000 errors. And out of those 600 lawsuits, you can see at the bottom, judgment for the plaintiff 11 times, 30 times judgment for the physicians. Very few go to trial, very few can prosecute that far, and it's such a small amount that win. So we're looking at 25% of those small amount of cases that actually proceed have a success rate. So a really, really tight group of people that will proceed and succeed in medical negligence cases. They pay about 1.2. So the statistics, they're pretty transparent with their stats. $240 million a year is paid out in to compensate victims of medical negligence. Compare that to $5 billion in Ontario just for auto. So it is not a lot of compensation for those 70,000 victims. It's a small amount of people that get compensation. About the same amount is paid for defense costs. So it's an equal amount. So you know that they are defending these cases right through to trial. You can't proceed with a medical negligence case unless you are willing to take it to trial. And they will spend the equal amount on their lawyers. So they're going to get the best lawyers to defend these cases. Their fund that they're drawing from is about $1.7 billion. That's what they have. They make, their return is $153 million in 1 year, or about $3 million a week. So if you think of your best medical negligence case, maybe it's $15 million. They make that up in about 3-4 weeks. Just through their investments. So if they delay the settlement, so let's say they settle your case with you at mediation and they delay that for 3 months, they've made up the cost of that payout just because of their investments. So it's quite a great system for them. And this is how their investment portfolio has grown over the last few years. And they use that obviously to reduce premiums for their members because they are considered nonprofit. So that's the background of why these cases are risky, why they're difficult. It is a small group that get compensated. And the question is going to be, well, why do we take on these cases? And I'll turn to that question after I deal with some of the technological issues that I foresee coming in the near future. So what do I see affecting the medical profession in the next few years? Artificial intelligence, we all know what that is, but we're going to talk a little further about that. The Human Genome Project, we've heard a lot about that and how that's progressing. Robotic nursing, so all that PSW costs that we put into our future care costs, what happens if that's replaced with a permanent surveillance system? Is that going to be good enough? How much is that going to cost? Do you pay a service fee, a subscription service? That could really have a huge impact on compensation for our clients that need 24-hour care. Neural engineering, so engineering into the brain and thinking about how those solutions coming forward are going to affect our world. And finally, if we want to go really into the future, how about little robots inside of us solving problems like cancer or disease? Talk about that. First, we have to talk about Moore's Law. Moore's Law is very interesting. Moore's Law came out saying that the processing speed of a microchip doubles every 2 years. So if we look at things starting with the first chip that ever came out, when it doubles to be 1 byte to 2 bytes to 3 bytes to 4 bytes, that didn't really impact our lives. And it would take a long time. We all grew up in this generation getting promised of great new technologies that would come out. And we were sort of waiting around for the newest version. And it took forever. It took 5 years for something to happen and then 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. But now all of a sudden things are happening quite quickly because we are talking in terabytes and petabytes. We're not talking in kilobytes anymore. So things are happening a lot quicker. Just think we're on version 15 of the iPhone. It's 15 years ago. We didn't even have an iPhone. It's hard to believe. 2005, like we didn't have that technology. A lot of us grew up without cell phones, and now everyone has a cell phone, right? It connects us to the internet. It connects us to everything. So imagine what's going to happen in the future as time goes on. If it keeps doubling every 2 years, we will have machine learning capabilities. We're all frustrated with how Siri, I'm not going to start all your phones because if I say the word, everyone's phone's going to light up. But, the way technology has improved, so we have speech recognition. AI is the idea that a computer can learn cognitive tasks and can start to mimic our behaviors and figure out what it is that repetitive tasks that we don't want to do that we'll delegate to our computer to do. So it's now really good at language. It's really good at calculations. data processing, getting information to you. And where is that going to take us? Well, it predicts that in the next 10 years, it will get to the level of what we call the singularity. Now, singularity means that a computer can mimic what we do. So that's where they talk about the dangers of what if the computer can reprogram itself and create new software to fix all its problems? That's the kind of computing we're going to see in the next 10 years. So right now we're using computing to sort and file and to interpret languages, do all sorts of data collection, find things for us very quickly. But imagine if you're going to be able to tell your computer, can you book an appointment for me at the hairdresser for next Thursday and tell my friend, I'm going to have to cancel lunch. And by the way, can you get this letter out to the lawyer and just here's the dictation of it. And it will know exactly what all that means. We're not far away from that, by the way. There's already a Google Calendar system where you can call and get them to call all your contacts and do things like that. So it's amazing what we're coming up to. How is it going to transform medicine? Well, look at all the areas that computing can affect. So, we've gone through a huge transformation with COVID. Now we're doing all sorts of remote medicine. That's been the sort of the trend. And in fact, a lot of my friends who are specialists are saying they're not wanting them in the hospital. They want them to do the telemedicine and continue with that, continue with Zoom intakes. And so, when you bring artificial intelligence into that, can it do that early detection? All those AI built into your wearables, you're going to have early detection of heart arrhythmia, temperature issues like that, early detection of disease. And so you can imagine how AI is going to transform the use of medicine. When I go get my eyes checked, there's a system now where they put you into a machine where you're getting your cataracts checked or your eyes checked, and they send it to a lab in Harvard where they're using Big Blue, an IBM machine, to cross-reference that image with all the images it's collected around the world. So imagine that kind of diagnosis where a doctor doesn't have to rely on just their own world of medicine, but they can go into the computer and see everything that's ever happened. And so I've got an example of that coming up. So predictive AI will be involved in diagnosis, behavioral recognition, and of course, helping with disease outbreak and things like that. The Human Genome Project is really interesting. There's a great TED Talk where Riccardo Sabatini in 2016 rolls out all of these books and says, the human genome is made up of letters, right? It's got the A, T, C, G, 4 letters. That's all it is in our DNA. And it just repeats. It repeats 3 billion times to make a human. So that's how we have studied our genome. And what he said is, you take the books of the human genome, you could fill up 2,000 Titanics with the amount of data that's in our DNA. And they've studied it, right? And he pulled out one little piece and he was talking about, we want to figure out how eyes are blue. And you can, they can find it in the code. And of course, he goes on to this presentation that there's only like 1% difference between us and a dog, for instance. Like it's crazy the amount that we're learning about how our DNA works. And over time, you can imagine how negatively this could be used. People will be designing their babies to be, much taller than me, much stronger, blue-eyed, et cetera, whatever they want. And, that's obviously, one of the concerns of how the Human Genome Project could be used in a negative way for designing and cultivating a future super race. But think about all the ways that it can detect disease and it can modify and make sure people live as long and a healthy life as possible. And I think that's pretty exciting as we go through that. So that's what it looks like when you open up one of the books and you see those 4 letters, and that's the density of the code for that one little section that he was demonstrating. But they've got a project called the Human Longevity Incorporation, which is looking at predictions for your life, right? So you can imagine how insurance companies will tap into this and rate you, not based on a blood test, but based on your DNA test. And that's not far away, right? So they'll look at what your potential body mass index is, chronological age based on your genes, not based on your actual age, facial structures, things like that you'll be able to predict. This is how it could be used in medicine.
Stanford University.
There's a global shortage of radiologists. According to the World Health Organization, 2/3 of the planet's population, over 4 billion people, have insufficient access to radiology services. AI can help that.
We developed a deep learning algorithm, which we call ChecksNext, to interpret chest X-ray images. That can take as input any chest X-ray image and tell you, in this image, what are the diseases that are present and what is my algorithm's predicted probability for each of those diseases. Some examples are mass and nodule, which are cancerous, cardiomegaly, enlargement of the heart, and pneumonia. The algorithm is also able to convey some insight into its decision-making process by highlighting for each disease what particular part of the image it's looking at to make its decision.
One of the things that we've done is to leapfrog over a lot of the technical and infrastructure hurdles that we would be likely to encounter in any given system and put the algorithm in the power of the smartphone.
When I open the app, I can upload an image of an X-ray or snap a picture right on my phone, and then that image is sent to the cloud and then run through the ChecksNext algorithm.
We have given this algorithm a very rigorous test, and we had 12 radiologists from around the country participate in this project, and we compared the performance of the algorithm against 9 of them.
The model performed comparably to the radiologists on metrics like accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity. The big difference in their performance was speed. The radiologists took around 4 hours on average to interpret the X-ray images. ChecksNext can interpret the X-ray images in less than 2 minutes.
Artificial intelligence and machine learning is in the process of transforming healthcare. But for this to work, we need AI specialists as well as medical specialists to work together.
If I were a doctor with a suspicion of a certain disease, I could get a confirmation from the algorithm. Or if I were a clinician who were using this app, the algorithm could direct my attention to something I may have earlier missed.
The ultimate vision, of course, is to have this in the hands of any clinician anywhere in the world who would like to use it. And to do that, we need to do some rigorous testing here at Stanford in a clinical trial format, and that's what we're doing now.
Well, that's just an example of how we can see tech interacting with medicine. Obviously, it can assist with nursing. Think about human support robots. They're doing this in Asia right now. 24-hour surveillance systems built into a robot that can keep people company in nursing homes, entertain them, get them help when they need it, two-way communication, as well as two-way surveillance. Used in critical care, you can see it in a residential setting. And then, of course, there's the excitement of tapping into the brain. Future neural engineering. We've heard about some of these projects where they can tap into the brain and essentially try to figure out, the mystery of how the brain works and how to fix the brain for issues like stroke and language, et cetera. Eventually, we may get to a time when we have AI built into us. The only way to sort of keep up with the future of AI and the singularity that people are so afraid of, with this dystopian idea that the computers will eventually think of us as an inconvenience and just rewrite the way our power grid system works and our internet works, and we will be left in their dust, is to sort of become part of them. So we have watches that connect us to the internet, phones that connect us to the internet, but what if it was actually tapped into us and we could connect, we could wear wearable glasses, we can essentially have the internet as part of us and be part of that computing future. And so nanobots is sort of this next iteration. So Ray Kurzweil is one of the founders of this project for Google. He actually created Siri when he was at DARPA for the government, and they sold it to Apple. And so you'll hear here a brief view of how Ray Kurzweil thinks of the future with the world of nanobots.
20 years from now, we'll have nanobots, because another exponential trend is the shrinking of technology. They'll go into our brain, through the capillaries, and basically connect our neocortex to synthetic neocortex in the cloud, providing extension of our neocortex. Now, today, I mean, you have a computer in your phone, but if you need 10,000 computers for a few seconds to do a complex search, you can access that for a second or two in the cloud. In the 2030s, you need some extra neocortex. You'll be able to connect to that in the cloud directly from your brain. So I'm walking along and I say, oh, there's Chris Anderson. Oh, he's coming my way. I better think of something clever to say. I've got 3 seconds. My 300 million modules in my neocortex isn't going to cut it. I need 1 billion more. I'll be able to access that in the cloud. And our thinking then will be a hybrid of biological and non-biological thinking. But the non-biological portion is subject to my law of accelerating returns. It will grow exponentially. And remember what happened the last time we expanded our neocortex? That was 2 million years ago when we became humanoids and developed these large foreheads. Other primates have a slanted brow. They don't have the frontal cortex. But the frontal cortex is not really qualitatively different. It's a quantitative expansion of neocortex. But that additional quantity of thinking was the enabling factor for us to take a qualitative leap and invent language and art and science and technology and TED conferences. No other species has done that. And so over the next few decades, we're going to do it again. We're going to again expand our neocortex, only this time it won't be limited by a fixed architecture of enclosure. It'll be expanded without limit. That additional quantity will again be the enabling factor for another qualitative leap in culture and technology. Thank you very much.
You may think that's far-fetched, but you can talk to Richard after. His son works at Google, and I don't think this stuff is as far out as you think. It's in their secret labs, and they're working on these things. So what is next with the nanobots and all the other things that we can hope for? Hopefully the end of cancer, bionic eyes, gene editing we talked about, personalized medicine, antibiotics specific for you, not for the population. AI with doctors for prescriptional care, wearable tech for diagnosis. We're already using that. Cybernetic limbs. We're going to have all sorts of advances with that, and lab-grown organs, 3D printing, things like that. So those are the things I like to follow in my Google alerts on a daily basis. I like to think out in the future, and I'm usually a glass half empty type of person. But in today's day and age, I also have to think of the practical realities of how to finance this practice and how to think about medical negligence cases as a business model. And it's not an easy model, and a lot of people are nervous to do this kind of work, and they should be. It is high risk, and there's a lot of expense to it. So just like I mentioned, there's probably 70,000 errors, so you're going to get lots of calls. We get at least a call a day, but how do you pick those calls? How do you decide which calls are the good calls? You can get lots of calls with terrible outcomes, and you think, well, that meets the damages threshold. But how are you going to figure out if it meets the negligence and causation threshold? You're going to hear a lot about causation today, and it's a lot of important things that will help you in determining case selection. Do they justify the investigation? Because the investigation is expensive. It could cost $10,000, $20,000 for you to just get an idea of whether you have a case. So how do you know which case to pick out of those thousands of calls you're going to get a year? Early review of the medical records. Do we know how to read medical records? How do you read those medical records critically to know where the mistakes are? And then early development of a theory with the expert. So, when your expert tells you don't have a case, do you know how to ask the right questions to make sure that you're getting the best advice from that expert? Are you critically challenging that expert? Doctors think of it from a scientific point of view. We think of it from a legal point of view. It's a different burden, and they're not always on the same page as what we need from them. So you have to be able to talk to them properly. And then, getting their support on standard of care and causation. It's easy to think about the damages and want to jump right to there. Won't the CMPA pay because we have a massive damage, big loss? No, you have to convince them that you have a winning case. And that's going to be that you prove the doctor's negligent and you prove that there's a link between the negligence and the harm. You don't prove that link, you're not going to win your case. And you're going to spend thousands of dollars, and you're going to drop your case just before trial when you realize you're going to have to spend another $150,000 to go to trial, and you're not going to want to do that. So what do these things cost? Well, it doesn't cost that much to get the records, but when they stay in the hospital for months and months at a time, It may cost $2,000, $5,000 to get all the records. You're not just getting hospital records. If it's an obstetrical case, you got to get the tracings, you got to get the labs, you got to get the films, you got to get everything. So, you know, the prenatal records, the maternal records, all of that is going to cost at least $5,000. Experts to review. You need at least, so 2 to 3 experts just on standard of care. That could be $5,000, $10,000 per expert. Causation, the same thing, improving the scientific reason that there's a link between what happened and the harm. So that gets really into the science of rewinding the clock. If this didn't happen, what would the outcome have been? So being able to understand the neuroradiology of it, all of those aspects, you're looking at another $35,000 of investigation. And then finally, when you get to the damage buildup, you've got to look at all the potential aspects of damage. What's the future outcome for this person? What are their neurological future? If it's a brain injury aspect, that could be, 5 to 10 experts to going through the damages, building it up with another $100,000. So you're in for almost $200,000 to get the case ready. And that doesn't include the amount of time that you've spent, as well as all the time required to get it to trial, the discovery, all the prep. And then you go and you bring these experts to trial and you're asking them for their time again. You could look at that time doubling. So you could be in for almost $400,000 to bring an obstetrical case to trial. And so we have a lot of good speakers here that'll tell you about those experiences. We'd like you to think about us when you're going forward, thinking about your cases and working with us as a partner. We have a great team that can help you, mentor you, help you develop these cases. So just think about us as you're receiving these cases and you don't know who to send the case to, or maybe you want to learn about the case, reach out to us. And we're happy to work with you and look at the arrangements to making it fair for everyone. So thank you for being here and thank you for being online. And I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the day with all the speakers we have coming up. Thank you.